The sky had gone dark, the earth had shaken, and the Son of God hung lifeless on a Roman cross. Blood streaked down the wood. A crown of thorns pressed into his head. The crowd that once shouted, "Hosanna," now stood silent, afraid. In those final moments, Jesus whispered his final breath, "It is finished." And then the world went quiet. The soldiers stepped back. The wind stopped howling, and heaven seemed to hold its breath. They took his broken body down from the cross. Cold, still, silent, a stone was rolled in front of the tomb, and hope appeared to be buried with him. For 3 days, silence reigned. It was a silence filled with sorrow, with confusion, and with the crushing weight of defeat. The dream was over. The movement was dead. Or so it seemed. That night, Jerusalem was restless. The disciples, the very men who had walked with Jesus for 3 years, hid behind locked doors. Fear was their jailer. Peter, the rock, the one who had sworn he would die for Jesus, now sat with his head in his hands, haunted by the memory of his own denial. The rooster's crow echoed in his soul. 3 times he had said, "I do not know him." Now the man he followed was gone. The women wept, their tears watering the dry ground of their shattered hopes. The other disciples trembled, listening for the sound of Roman soldiers at the door. Fear ruled every heart. They thought it was over. They thought Rome had won. They thought death had the final word. But they were wrong. Because what they couldn't see, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that the silence was not an ending. It was a prelude. It was the quiet before the greatest storm of victory the world had ever known. Before the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky, Mary Magdalene began her somber journey. She walked through the sleeping streets of Jerusalem, her hands carrying spices to anoint a body, and her heart carrying a sorrow too heavy for words. She expected death. She expected silence. She expected a sealed tomb, guarded by Roman power. That was the reality she knew. But when she arrived, the world she knew was turned upside down. The stone, a massive rock that took several men to move, was gone. It had been rolled away. The tomb was open. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Fear and confusion warred within her. She ran. She ran as fast as her legs could carry her, back to where the disciples were hiding. Bursting through the door, she cried out, "They have taken the Lord. We don't know where they have put him." Peter and John, spurred by her frantic words, leaped to their feet and ran to the tomb. John, being younger, outran Peter, but he stopped at the entrance, peering into the darkness. When Peter arrived, he went straight inside. They looked. The grave clothes were there. But they weren't ripped or cast aside in a struggle. They were folded. Neat, orderly. The cloth that had been around Jesus' head was folded up by itself, separate from the linen. The body was gone. Confusion filled their minds. Where was he? What had happened? They returned to the others, their minds racing with questions. But Mary stayed behind, weeping, overwhelmed by grief. She could not leave. She leaned into the tomb, peering through her tears into the cool, dark space. And then she saw them. 2 angels, dressed in dazzling white, sat where the body of Jesus once lay, one at the head and one at the feet. They spoke gently to her, their voices like calming music. "Woman, why are you weeping?" Through her sobs, she whispered, "They have taken my Lord, and I don't know where they have laid him." As she said this, she turned round. A man was standing behind her. In her grief and the dim morning light, she didn't recognize him. She thought he was the gardener. He asked her the same question. "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he had moved the body, she pleaded, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." And then he spoke her name. "Mary, It was just one word. But in that single moment, the entire universe shifted. The voice that had calmed storms, healed the sick, and taught with authority, now pierced through her grief. She knew, her heart leaped within her. Rabboni, she cried out, which means teacher. It was him, alive, glorious, victorious. Death had failed. The grave was empty. Jesus had risen. Mary ran. She didn't walk. She ran through the city, her heart pounding not with sorrow, but with an explosive, world-changing joy. Her message was a thunderclap that shattered the morning quiet. I have seen the Lord. The disciples could hardly believe it. It sounded like nonsense, an idle tale born from grief. They remained in their locked room, caught between a flicker of hope and the heavy blanket of fear. But that same evening, as they were gathered together, the doors still locked for fear of the authorities, something impossible happened. A voice spoke from inside the room, not from outside the door, but from among them. Peace be with you. Jesus stood before them, alive, real. He wasn't a ghost, he was flesh and blood. To prove it, he showed them his hands, scarred by the nails. He showed them his side, pierced by a Roman spear. In that moment, fear vanished. It evaporated like mist in the morning sun. Confusion was replaced by stunning clarity. Tears of sorrow exploded into tears of pure, unadulterated joy. Hope, which had been buried in a tomb, returned like a tidal wave. The impossible became reality. The man they had seen die was alive. But one disciple wasn't there. Thomas. When the others found him and told him the incredible news, "We have seen the Lord," he shook his head. He was a practical man, a man who needed proof. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and place my hand in his side, I will not believe." He had set his terms for belief. 8 days later, the disciples were together again, and this time, Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, just as before. And just as before, Jesus appeared among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then, he looked straight at Thomas. He met Thomas's doubt not with anger, but with a gentle, loving invitation. "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting. And believe." In that moment, all of Thomas's skepticism crumbled. He didn't need to touch the wounds. Seeing was enough. Seeing the living, resurrected Lord, who knew his every doubt, was all the proof he needed. He fell to his knees and made one of the greatest confessions in history, "My Lord and my God." This encounter changed everything. The resurrection wasn't just an event, it was an ignition. The same men who once hid in a locked room for fear of their lives now preached with unshakable courage in the streets of Jerusalem. The same Peter who had denied even knowing Jesus 3 times now stood before thousands on the day of Pentecost and shouted with fiery conviction, "You crucified him, but God raised him from the dead." His fear was gone, replaced by a fire that could not be quenched. And that day, the Bible tells us, 3,000 people believed. Not because of a clever story, not because of a philosophical argument, but because of a resurrection. They saw the change in these men. The men who had been cowards were now lions, and the only explanation was that they had seen the risen Christ. The meaning of that first Easter morning echoes through eternity. The tomb wasn't opened to let Jesus out. He was God. A stone could not hold him. It was opened to let the world look in. It was an invitation for all of humanity to see that death had lost its sting. Sin was defeated. Hope was reborn. The cross, which looked like the ultimate defeat, was not the end. It was the beginning of a new creation. The resurrection proved that God's power is greater than any force on earth, greater than armies, greater than empires, and greater than death itself. So, what does this mean for you, today, right now? If Jesus defeated death, then the fear that holds you captive has no ultimate power. If the grave is empty, then your past, your mistakes, and your regrets can be forgiven and left behind. If he rose from the dead, then no darkness in your life is permanent. No situation is truly hopeless. Because the same power that rolled the stone away, the same power that raised Christ from the grave, is not just a historical fact. It is a living, breathing reality that still changes lives today. It can bring hope to your despair, peace to your anxiety, and life to the parts of you that feel dead. That is the promise of the empty tomb. Thanks for watching. If this message moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that explores the power of faith.